You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hey there, I'm Andrea Heng. Welcome to the Money Talks podcast. Now, this episode was produced in partnership with the Ministry of Health. Now, in mid-October, there was an announcement made about MediShield Life. That is our national health insurance plan. By the way, in case you weren't already aware, the good news is from April next year, 2025, claims limits for hospital stays and outpatient treatments are going to go up. There's some bad news to that as well, unfortunately. Premiums for MediShield Life, as a result, are going to go up too, by as much as 35%. So we wanted to create an episode to help us make sense of the changes. And to help me with that, I have in the studio with me now Dr. Cynthia Chen, Assistant Professor at the NUS Swee Hock School of Public Health. Hello, Cynthia.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Now, there's a lot of changes announced, and we're trying to filter and sift through what's important and what we really need to pay attention to. First and foremost, right off the bat, how are these new changes going to affect me? How much more will I have to pay? That's top of mind, right? And if more things can be paid through MediSave, what's going to be the implication down the line?
Okay, so the good news with the changes being announced is with the higher claims limit, with higher outpatient coverage, we now have a greater financial protection, but it comes at a cost. The cost would be that all of our premiums on average are going to increase by 22%. For the older ages, up to 35%. So maybe I can give an example of how insurance works.
Yes, please.
Okay, so imagine we have a group of 100 people and there's a 1% chance of one person having a major issue that costs $20,000. So without insurance, this person will have to pay the $20,000 out of pocket. But with insurance, instead of leaving one person to pay the full cost, now this risk is shared across 100 people.
Okay.
So per person now, you will pay $200 into this insurance fund. Okay. For that one person who needs the money, the insurance fund will cover. So as a group, now all the 100 are protected against the high cost with the financial peace of mind. So instead of $20,000, now everybody just pays $200,
right?
But everybody is protected.
Okay. So it's a shared burden, but also comes with a shared benefit.
Correct. It's a shared burden with a shared benefit. So with insurance, it spreads the financial risk for individuals. When the coverage improves, everyone benefits from it. But with better protection, it comes at a higher price.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, some people have this in mind, right? Okay, the premiums are going up, so maybe I should use my MediSave less or my MediShield Life premiums. I should just use whatever is subsidized less. So should I start paying for stuff in cash then so that I can preserve those funds? What's your advice here?
When it comes to premium, I think if you can't afford it, actually paying by MediSave is fine.
Okay.
But if let's say there are certain treatments that you undergo that requires MediSave, but you actually have the cash to pay upfront, then it's helpful to think whether should you be paying those by MediSave or through cash.
Okay.
Because MediSave in and of itself is enforced savings where it's supposed to last a lifetime. So the more you use or the more we use when we are younger means that we have much lesser when we are older where we really need healthcare the most.
Correct. Yeah. So that's a good point there. Now, this is the second time that MediShield Life has been reviewed since its inception in 2015. Why is it important to review the insurance scheme regularly? Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of stuff like inflation, that sort of stuff.
Right. So MediShield Life is Singapore's national health insurance scheme that helps residents to manage the big hospital bills and certain outpatient treatment, therefore reducing out-of-pocket expenses.
Right.
With the rising cost of inflation, like what you've mentioned, the growing demands and expectation for healthcare, the aging population, with all the new technologies, both the claims limit and premiums needs to be adjusted upwards. So just now in my example of the $20,000, if we imagine that for this 100 group of individuals, there is greater coverage. More people use healthcare because they are getting older, they have more chronic diseases, there is greater protection, then the risk is divided out with this 100 people, the premiums are going to increase.
Right. So it's also a point to note that we are an aging society.
Right.
More old people are going to be around than ever. And that's something that we really need to emphasize as well, because someone's going to have to foot the bill at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's giving me a clearer idea of why we need to review it from time to time. In your professional opinion, what's the most significant change in the review?
So there are a couple of things. One of it is really the increase in the claims limit and also the increase in outpatient coverage.
Yes.
So for example, now the scheme covers more outpatient treatments where kidney dialysis limits have increased by 60%. So this allows individuals to pay less out of pocket and out of their MediSave. But with that, individuals also require to increase their premiums.
Yeah.
So what we mentioned earlier, older adults have the increased premium of 35%. But the government do come in and help with the different groups of older adults population. So like for pioneer generation, there is premium subsidy from 40 to 60%. Merdeka is between 5 to 10% in addition to the means tested premium subsidy based on the various income groups. So lower income groups have higher subsidy compared to the higher income groups.
Yeah. So immediately the group of people that come to mind are those that may not be able to afford these higher premiums. What about them? How can they think about this and not think to themselves, how am I going to afford this?
Right. So if they are from the pioneer generation, the nice thing is the government has this MediSave top-up between 300 to 1,002 and this is done annually.
Okay.
On top of it, because of the premium subsidy between 40 to 60%, a large part of it is really covered by the government. So if anyone is above the age of 75, which belongs to the pioneer generation, then they have better support.
Okay, I guess a good way to look at it, to remember that there are top-ups there to help shoulder cushion the blow. One of the biggest changes is the increase in claims limits for ward patients. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. The one that stuck out to us was the daily claims for ICU patients, intensive care unit patients. That's gone up as well from 2,200 per day to over 5,000 now. Now, that's a sizable jump. That's more than double.
Right.
Do we know why the government's decided to do this?
So ICU charges tends to be higher because they involve intense monitoring, advanced treatments, and a specialized team of doctors and nurses. So the increase allows claims limit to be better aligned with the real increase of healthcare and to reduce out-of-pocket expenditures for patients who really need it the most. A personal experience when I have a family member who had a brain aneurysm, that resulted in a night in ICU and an emergency operation that cost more than $22,000.
Oh, yeah. Emergency operations tend to really have a big
very
high price tag.
Yes. But with the government subsidy, it lowers the bill to $8,000. And we are presented that full $8,000. So you're wondering,
am I missing something
here?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we kind of went to ask the hospital if the patient has MediShield Life and stuff. Then when they incorporated MediShield Life that pays $7,500, at the end we only need to pay $500 out of our MediSave.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was brought down and then it was brought down again because of MediShield Life.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So that's something to, I'm not going to say look forward to, but it's an assurance of sort. It really relieves the burden of price pressures because it's something that's always on Singaporeans' minds. We can't talk about the review without talking about how much it will cost us, right? But Health Minister Ong Ye Kung did say that the claim limits are to help 9 out of 10 subsidized bills. So first and foremost, I want to talk about two different groups of people here. The first group of people are the patients that are likely going to benefit from this. So who are they?
Patients who use subsidized care generally will benefit quite substantially from this. And actually, older adults, although they pay higher premiums, they are also more likely to use healthcare.
Yeah.
For instance, I have that older adult family member who has the brain aneurysm and then using healthcare that costs quite a substantial amount. And with the insurance coming in to really help offset the claims, it really helps in a stressful situation where finances is no longer area of consideration or an area of stress.
Yeah.
So Singapore, we have a social safety net called the MediFund, where if an individual couldn't pay the bills, the MediFund will actually come in, but the individual will have to work with the medical social worker to kickstart this. Because MediShield Life is a mandated national health insurance, no one is going to lose the national health insurance because they can't afford the premiums.
Unlike private insurance,
yes,
right?
Unlike private IP insurance where a large part of it is really the individual's responsibility.
Yeah, where the policy lapses if you don't pay the bill. Okay, so that is the safety net then.
Right.
Then there's the other group of people which are your seniors. And you mentioned this at length, right? The Merdeka generation and the Pioneer generation. And we have a table on cna.asia that does this comparison chart of the increase, the premium increase, the subsidized increase as well. And it does seem like it's the biggest jump for these two groups of people, right? What happens if they can't afford to pay those higher premiums, even with the shortfall being cushioned by the government with those top-ups?
Right. So the government actually do offer additional premium support for those who are unable to afford the increase in premiums. So no one is going to lose their health insurance if they can't afford to pay the premiums.
So when it comes to the new high-cost treatments like cell therapy, some high-cost drugs, they are all also newly added in this review. Let's talk about that. What's new?
For the cell, tissue, and gene therapy, they are actually promising treatment options for conditions that are currently difficult to treat. The government has some pilot where, for example, a CAR T cell therapy that modifies the individual's own immune cells to fight cancer. Kymriah is the cell therapy for leukemia patients who have not responded well to conventional treatments.
Okay.
So this is the first of the list that is in MOH. This treatment, I went to Google, it costs about more than $500,000 in Singapore.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a six-figure sum. There's no guarantee that the treatment works also. It's purely how your body responds to it, right?
So I think they usually do some genetic testing to make sure that the individuals may respond. So usually individuals may go through a first line of conventional treatment and then it doesn't work, and therefore this promising therapy actually is useful.
Okay. And this is something that's a bit closer to your heart. I can tell that this is something that's close to you. Are there others that stick out to you in this review?
So far from what I read, this is the only one that's on the list. And to me, the whole purpose of how insurance work is really that risk pooling. And the event where in a rare situation an individual needs it, that individual don't have to cough out that huge sum of money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be an inequitable healthcare system in Singapore where only the rich could afford that $500,000 of treatment, whereas the rest of us would just forego that treatment because
it just costs too much, right? Yeah. Oh dear. I wanted to talk now about the timing of the decision to include these new treatments in the review. Why now?
I guess in the MediShield Life review, from an insurance perspective, the government has already been aware that some of this treatment are already available out there. The challenge really is how to allow the treatments that are clinically effective and also cost effective to be covered by the insurance. So this is a little bit like a baby step where we take things one step at a time and then we see how it works. And the individuals who are exposed to the treatment, how much quality of life do they gain from it?
I think that's a fair point as well. And that's something that is going to give impetus to the relevant authorities to keep reviewing the program every now and again, especially with how rapid developments are in medtech, right? Yeah. Okay, so just to cap off here, Cynthia, I like how you brought up the anecdote of a family member not getting a shock of a bill at the end of all of that. So what advice do you have to friends and family, relatives, or listeners out there on how to manage your healthcare costs here in Singapore?
I think for an individual, when I have my working friends, I will ask them to consider their insurance options early, especially if they can afford it, to look at their overall health status, to understand their family history of chronic conditions, and also to know like the number of dependents they have. Because once they are presented with a health shock, then the question is whether would they want to put their family into this risk where now I'm seeing how much do I have in my MediSave and then how much in my family's MediSave to be able to cover that. So that's one of it. The other one, with regards to healthcare utilization, I think all of us have a part to play. So in the example that I gave earlier on the group of 100 people and the healthcare use, so basically if this 100 people now all uses a lot of healthcare, then on average, as an entire group, our healthcare costs would all go up.
Correct.
And then all of our premiums will actually increase. And part of this increase is not to effective use of healthcare.
Yeah.
For us, as we are becoming more and more educated and we read a lot more, we should be open to ask questions to our doctors whether are certain treatment or procedures really necessary? Are there other options? Yeah.
It's kind of like investing almost, where you have to do your own homework before jumping the gun and like making that decision, right?
Right.
You had a third option there. You had a third thought there.
Yeah, so the last one is, I think all of us can try to stay as healthy as possible, that we will lower healthcare costs in the long run, but on top of it, to get our body immunity up. So when we are sick, we tend to bounce back a lot faster, or we are less likely to use or to need all the expensive care.
Yeah.
So the good news is, I think late next year, MediShield Life policyholders now have the option to be able to have premium discount through their health points, the Healthy 365 app, that could be used to offset what their premiums is.
So that's an impetus for us to download the Health 365 app.
Right.
Time to chalk up some steps.
Yes.
And points to give me some discounts. And I think this whole conversation really brings to mind a renewed definition of health is wealth, right?
Right.
Because you're not just staying healthy so that you can be able-bodied enough to earn income, but wealth in your savings as well, because
Right.
you end up spending less out of pocket as well.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Cynthia. It was
Thank
really
you.
great to have you really lay the law of the land and help us understand what's going on here, make sense of all the new changes. So now we've come to the fun part of the Money Talks podcast. You can see this hat on the table. It's got some questions, nothing personal.
Right.
So pick a question, pick a card from the hat, hand it to me, and I'll read it out to you. Okay, Cynthia, your question from a hat is: if you could have a meal with any public figure, dead or alive, who would it be and why? And your answer will have absolutely nothing to do with what we talked about today. So feel free.
I would love the opportunity to maybe speak with our late Minister Mentor Lee of how he have given his life to Singapore and building what we went from a third world to a first world, and how he have that foresight to really make the hard decisions that we as a society actually need to make to get us to where we are today.
Yeah, a brilliant man indeed. Dr. Chen, or Cynthia, as you prefer to be called, thank you so much for coming down to the Money Talks podcast.
Thank
Really
you for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Thank you.
And dear listener, to you, we hope that you had something to take away from this very special episode. It's going to affect you, me, and everyone in your household for sure. So if you have any thoughts, questions, remarks, feedback about this topic, even other topics on the Money Talks podcast, you can just slide into our DMs. You can find Money Talks on the Apple Podcasts app, as well as Spotify and YouTube Music. Don't forget to rate us and subscribe so you will always know when a new episode drops. A big thanks to the team, Crispina Robert, Tiffany Ang, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, To Yen Yin, and Sa Ye Wind. I'm Andrea Heng. Thank you for listening to Money Talks, and don't forget to download that Health 365 app.